There's nothing that can kill player excitement faster than having a player character that is simply not fun to play mechanically. That, whenever it comes time to roll the dice, whether that's in exploration, combat, or even in social situations, the character simply doesn't feel exciting or can't even participate on equal footing with the other characters. So in this video, I want to talk about how we make player characters that are mechanically fun. The first thing is versatility. You can make a fighter that is very, very good at wielding a sword and hitting people or stuff with that sword, but that's not a versatile character. In any situation where you are not supposed to hit people with a sword, well, that fighter is gonna be very boring because it's not going to be good at what's going on. So for that reason, I think it's very important that you think about, and as a DM, you talk to your players to make them think about making characters that are versatile. You just need to have 2 or 3 options for things you can do, scenarios that you are actually mechanically fun in. So in the example of the fighter, that would be making sure that you also have a ranged attack option you can fall back on when melee combat is not an option, and maybe that you have some skill checks that are viable outside of combat. You don't just go with, let's say, perception, athletics, acrobatics, stealth, which are some very common options for a fighter class character. You may want to branch out and make sure that you have some sort of knowledge skill, maybe a charismatic skill, maybe an investigation skill. That of course also applies to the various features, spells, class abilities, subclass stuff you pick up along the way. Try to pick the options that are not just going to emphasize the one thing you're really good at so you become the best grappler in the world or the best melee fighter in the world. Try and also think about how can I make sure that I'm viable in other situations, because otherwise you may end up just being bored most of the time because your situation doesn't come up often enough, or you end up being like a hammer where every problem seems like a nail. So every time the other characters try to use diplomacy or stealth, you're just charging in with your sword because that's where you have the most fun and, well, to hell with everyone else's fun. And that's not, in long term, a very enjoyable way to play D&D, in my opinion. And that actually leads us to the second thing that I think you should think about when making a mechanically fun character, and that is fitting in with the party. And this is really important, why I always have a session 0 when making characters, or at least discuss with players individually and as a group how they can make characters that will fit well together. So fitting in with the party could mean making sure that you pick up some skills that the other characters don't have. Take the character class or the subclass or the race that is not represented in your party. Take up the skills that are not represented. But it is not just about shoring out deficiencies. You also want to make sure that your character concept doesn't destroy the party's concept as a whole. So let's say that the rest of the party are decent at stealthing, and you know that they want to have a stealth approach to combat. They want to try and sneak in and assassinate people or infiltrate more than go straight on. And you make this caricaturic fighter with a heavy plate that is going to barge in everywhere. Make sure that you discuss that with the rest of the party first, because while it can be fun to be that disruptive character who ruins the plans, it can also be fun if you just take some steps to be somewhat stealthy, so you don't have to be either left behind or ruin everyone else's plan every time. Now the third and final point, and in my experience the most important point when it comes to combat, is action economy. It's very normal for players to build player characters that have very good actions. They'll emphasize the action. I want to be able to make these attacks and do this, and I want to cast these spells. I'm choosing that spell, this class feature is an action, I can use that. But the public secret of D&D 5e is that it's not necessarily your action that is the most important, it's your bonus action and your reaction. Not because these are stronger, they obviously aren't, but because they are not guaranteed. Every character gets an action and a move action on the turn. There'll always be something to do with your action, but there'll not always be something you can do with your bonus action or your reaction, especially if you don't build toward it. If you can utilize on every round in combat your action, your bonus action, and your reaction, think about how much more you're doing than the character that only uses its action. And that's not just in terms of dealing damage or doing stuff, it's also in terms of actually being engaged in the combat. Because if you're constantly looking for ways to apply your bonus action in combat or ways you can react to stuff, you have to pay attention. You can't be looking at your phone, because you need to know, okay, when this monster moves or attacks, I get to make an attack as a reaction, or I get to do this as a reaction. And this goes out to the DMs, and this is why it's really important. It keeps your players engaged in the combat at times where they would otherwise just be, well, not paying attention because it's not their turn in combat, or because the turn is so quickly over. Now, as I mentioned, that's not a guarantee that you have these options, so you have to go out of your way to make sure that you get them. That could mean picking up spells that use bonus actions. There's spells like Spiritual Weapon, Misty Step, stuff like that you can use as bonus action. There's reaction spells, Shield, Absorb Elements, and stuff like that you get to use as reactions. Another place to look for these sort of actions are also feats. We have stuff like Shield Master or the new telekinetic feat where you can push someone as a bonus action. Just try and think about picking up at least one bonus action option and one reaction option, because having that improved action economy is going to not only make your character a lot better, it's also gonna make sure that you have a lot more fun in combat. So yeah, that's my top 3 tips for making characters that are mechanically fun to play. If you have any other tips, please let me know in the description below, or if you just have a comment on the tips that I've given you here, I would love to hear it. Beyond that, there's not a whole lot left to say, except thank you so much for watching, and I hope that I'll see you in the next video.